A man sat at a wooden table, voraciously devouring a succulent piece of meat, its juices glistening as they dribbled down his chin. Behind him, a hungry boy watched with longing in his eyes, feeling the pangs of hunger claw at his empty stomach. He couldn't help but think, "Don't gobble up that meat so brazenly." As he pondered this, someone approached him, breaking his reverie. A concerned voice inquired, "Hey, what are you doing just standing there?" The crowd around them gathered, and a finger pointed accusingly at the boy. "Is he trying to tarnish the name of the Blalik household, one of the 5 great families?" they questioned. The boy's gaze dropped to the ground, and he stammered out an apology to Roxy Sama, a man of authority. Raphael's expression twisted with disdain as he muttered, "I can't believe I have to waste a salary on scum like you," and carelessly tossed some coins in the boy's direction. Anger welled up inside the boy, but his poverty rendered him powerless. The coins lay on the ground, ignored by the boy, and Raphael chided him. "What's the matter? Are you not going to pick it up?" With a sigh, Raphael continued, "You should be grateful for this meager salary." Reluctantly, the boy bent down to collect the coins, all the while feeling a burning sense of injustice. Raphael added, his voice dripping with condescension, "Your incompetence in this field of work is taking the place of an honorable holy knight. You know what I mean?" Raphael's relentless bullying continued as he sneered, "Normally there isn't a salary for people like you." He pressed, "Why don't you pick the money up more eagerly?" and then remarked, "Your mistakes are our responsibility, and if this goes on, you'll meet a fate worse than beheading." As the boy picked up the coins, his stomach growled loudly, a painful reminder of his hunger. Raphael seized the opportunity to taunt him once more. "What the hell are those noises?" He delivered a vicious kick to the boy's stomach, causing him to fall to the ground, wincing in agony. Raphael's friend pointed at the fallen boy and questioned, "What's that? He looks like a maggot." Raphael scoffed and warned, "Come on, get up quicker. Otherwise I'll be accused of negligence and poor gatekeeping by the other holy knights." In a cruel act, Raphael placed his foot on the boy's head and applied pressure, making it harder for the boy to rise. But just as the boy's suffering seemed unbearable, a voice intervened. A woman's voice, firm and resolute, called out, "Raphael, stop it!" She walked closer to the scene, her eyes filled with disapproval. "This behavior is unsuitable for a holy knight." Reluctantly, Raphael removed his foot from the boy's head and turned to face the newcomer. "So, Roxy Hart is on today's shift," he muttered. Roxy Hart approached the boy and Raphael, while Raphael and his friends began to retreat. Just before leaving, Raphael couldn't resist one final taunt. "At best, you should be diligent while standing on guard," he sneered, his gaze fixed on the boy. Then he turned and smirked as he walked away. Roxy Hart, on the other hand, addressed the boy by his name, Fate, and asked with genuine concern, "Are you all right, Fate?" Fate looked at her in astonishment. He couldn't believe she remembered his name. He nodded, managing a faint smile as he said, "I'm fine. Thank you for helping me." Roxy Hart extended her hand, offering support to help Fate get up. "We are comrades, gatekeepers, after all," she reminded him. "Take turns, and if they ever do anything like that to you again, I will." Fate didn't let her complete the sentence, cutting in, "I'm all right." With a nod of gratitude, he turned and hurried away, his mind filled with thoughts of Roxy. He couldn't bear the idea of her getting involved with those heartless bullies because of him. He wanted Roxy to follow her own path, unhindered by the likes of Raphael and his cruel comrades. It was not just for her sake, but also for the sake of the kingdom. With this resolve, Fate continued on his way into the bustling town, his stomach growling again. He knew that hard bread and thin soup wouldn't suffice. They hardly made a dent in his gnawing hunger. Deep in thought, he pondered the quirks of this world. Here, everyone was born with a unique skill, a blessing from God, but Fate was among the unfortunate ones. His skill was gluttony, a strange ability that made him excessively hungry. He often felt like an unnecessary existence in this world. In contrast, there were holy knights, people with their own twisted ways, people one could never hope to defeat in a fight. Fate couldn't help but recall the torment he endured at the hands of Raphael and his comrades. He hoped fervently that they weren't harassing Roxy Sama. As Fate strolled past the town's buildings, Roxy appeared before him, performing her gatekeeping duties. Her presence brought him relief, but something else caught his attention. Intruders were attempting to scale one of the buildings. Fate realized it was a blind spot for Roxy, and he hurried to inform her. He ran toward her, calling out, "Roxy Sama!" She noticed him approaching and asked if he hadn't returned home. Fate explained the dire situation, the bandits climbing the east wall. Roxy was taken aback and asked for confirmation, to which Fate replied with unwavering certainty. Roxy took a deep breath, her demeanor calm. She handed over her polearm to Fate and informed him that she would make her way there. She asked him if he could take over as gatekeeper while she was gone. Fate nodded in agreement, his concern for her evident. As she prepared to leave with her sword, Fate called out, "Best of luck." She smiled at him and reassured him, "Leave it to me. I'm confident in my ability to stop them." With that, Roxy headed towards the east wall, her determined strides echoing her resolve. Fate watched her anxiously as she disappeared from sight. Before we continue, take a moment to answer the question of the day. What manhwa would you recommend to someone new to the genre? Share your top picks. Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out. Now, back to the recap. Roxy encountered the group of intruders and engaged in a fierce battle. Time passed, and Fate began to wonder if it was over. He marveled at Roxy's incredible prowess, thinking, Roxy Sama really is amazing. Lost in thought, he suddenly realized that one of the intruders was approaching him, his hand bleeding. Fate assumed it was Roxy Sama, but he was in for a surprise. The intruder dismissed him as a small fry and demanded he get out of the way. Fate couldn't allow that. If the intruder passed, the blame would fall on Roxy Sama. He tightened his grip on the polearm, determined not to yield. With swift action, Fate attacked the intruder, defeating him with the polearm. He declared, I did it! Then, something unexpected happened. His Gluttony skill activated, boosting his stamina by 150, willpower by 100, strength by 150, and agility by 30. It was as if his every stat had been amplified, and he felt a sensation akin to his stomach being filled. To add to the surprise, 2 new abilities manifested, appraisal and mind reading. Roxy Hart, having returned, called out his name in concern. She asked if he was all right and whether he was hurt, her eyes filled with worry. Roxy firmly gripped Fate's shoulder, her concern evident in her eyes. She informed him that she had mistakenly let one of the intruders slip through. She noted his pale complexion and voiced her worry. Feeling nervous, Fate stammered, No, it's nothing, trying to conceal his anxiety. Roxy, however, could see through his facade. She inquired further, her voice filled with genuine concern. Is something bothering you? She asked. Fate hesitated, but finally confessed, I'm really fine. Didn't even get hurt. Relieved, Roxy sighed and signed, What a relief. Thank goodness. She withdrew her hand from his shoulder, leaving Fate puzzled by her earlier gesture. Fate called her attention and suggested that they should act as though they had successfully dealt with all the intruders. Roxy protested, deeming it unfair, and reminded him that he had also taken care of one of them. Fate acknowledged her point, admitting that it was thanks to her help. He added, If Raphael Sama were to find out about this, it would be troublesome. Roxy agreed, saying, Okay, understood. We'll report it the way you suggested. Fate expressed his gratitude once more, saying, Thank you very much. Roxy, however, felt the need to thank him as well. She remarked that if Fate hadn't warned her about the intruders, she could have tarnished the reputation of the Hart family. She proposed an idea. Why don't you come and work for the Hart family? I'm sure my father would take you in. Fate was taken aback by the suggestion and responded, No way. My skill is useless, and there's an issue with the Blelik family. Roxy reassured him, telling him not to worry about the Blelik family and questioning whether he intended to work for them his entire life. Fate pondered her words, realizing that it might not be a good idea to limit himself in such a way. He then bowed to her and said, Then, I look forward to working with you. Roxy smiled and replied, Good. It's already late, so you should go home today. Come to the Hart household the day after tomorrow at noon. I'll be waiting for you. Fate bowed once more, his heart filled with happiness, and expressed his gratitude, saying, Thank you very much. As Fate's thoughts shifted, he found himself standing on a field of lifeless bodies, a sword in his hand, and a skull mask on his face. But suddenly, he opened his eyes, snapping back to reality, a sense of disorientation lingering from the vivid dream. Fate had a restless night plagued by a haunting nightmare. When he awoke, he couldn't help but feel that the dream was more than just a strange occurrence. It made him question whether what happened yesterday had been real or just a dream. As the memories of Raphael's bullying and his fight with the intruder flooded back, he realized it had all been painfully real. The lingering thought about the voice he had heard yesterday nagged at him. He recalled it saying, appraisal and mind reading. Curiously, as he pondered this, a mysterious chart appeared before him, floating in the air. Fate blinked in amazement, realizing that he could actually see his status now. His stats had all increased, and he couldn't help but exclaim, What in the world? With a shocked expression, he noted that all his stats were now in 3 digits, even though they should have remained at 1. Fate surmised that appraisal and mind reading had indeed been added to his skills. He concluded that the voice he heard when Roxy touched him last night must have been related to this newfound skill. He wondered if it was the effect of his gluttony skill, stealing the lives of those he killed and turning them into his own power. Fate felt a different sensation he had never experienced before, a sense of fulfillment. Grinning, he acknowledged that he now understood what it was. With newfound clarity, he declared, There is only one thing left to do. Leaving his house behind, Fate ventured into the bustling Safart business district. People hustled and bustled, engrossed in their daily routines. Fate examined the 2 silver coins he held in his palm, realizing that they were all he had. If he wanted to buy a weapon, it would have to be from a shop around here. However, he doubted that the high-class stores would even allow him inside. As he strolled past the stores, a shop owner called out to him, addressing him as Oni-isan. Fate turned to see an elderly shop owner who seemed to have seen through him. The old man remarked that Fate had been eyeing the weapons, to which Fate couldn't help but agree. The shop owner then asked, "So, what do you think? Want to take a look?" He gestured toward the weapons displayed in his store. Fate had hoped that he might be able to afford something decent from a shop like this, so he cautiously agreed to take a look at the old man's weapons. The shop owner then asked Fate about his budget for buying a weapon. With a hint of hesitation, Fate displayed his 2 silver coins to the old man. The elderly shop owner's face contorted into a disgusted expression, and he bluntly remarked, "You're piss poor after all. I shouldn't have been so kind." He proceeded to show Fate a collection of weapons, calling them trash weapons, and informed him that these were the only ones he could afford. The old man couldn't help but laugh at Fate's expense, cruelly noting that these weapons would suit him perfectly. Disheartened by the lack of options, Fate realized that it might be the same anywhere he went. He resigned himself to choosing a weapon from this unimpressive selection. As he approached the pile of seemingly worthless weapons and reached out for one, an unexpected phenomenon occurred. As his hand touched a black sword, he saw the weapon's stats immediately, revealing that they were indeed nothing but scrap. Desperate for even a slightly better option, Fate reached for the black sword. However, as soon as his hand grasped it, he heard a voice emanating from the sword, uttering the words, "Buy me." Fate jumped back in astonishment, wondering how the sword had just spoken. The sword suddenly illuminated, leaving Fate bewildered. He thought, how did this sword just talk? The old man, growing impatient, scolded him, saying, "If you aren't planning to buy anything, then get lost already." Fate glanced at the old man, questioning whether he was the only one who had heard the sword's voice. Gathering his courage, Fate approached the sword once more and cautiously held it in his hand. Again, a voice resonated within his mind saying, "Interesting, you aren't running away." Fate realized that the sword was communicating with him through his newly acquired mind-reading skill. Puzzled by this unusual encounter, Fate wondered if the sword was cursed, or if it was merely an uncommon occurrence. As he attempted to examine the sword's stats, he was surprised to find that he could see only its name and form, leaving him with more questions than answers. Fate couldn't discern any details about the sword apart from its name and form. He couldn't help but draw a parallel between the way the sword was treated and his own life. The sword inquired about his decision, asking if he would buy it. Fate pondered his options, glancing at the other swords on display. In the end, he made up his mind and replied, "Yeah, I will take you. I don't have any money anyway, and I feel like we resemble each other." The sword responded with acceptance, stating, "Very well, this must be some kind of destiny. No, maybe fate." It assured Fate that it would accompany him for the rest of his days. Curious about Fate's name, the sword asked what it should call him. Fate introduced himself as Fate Graphite. He inquired about the sword's name, and it revealed itself as Greed. Greed emphasized that Fate should consider himself honored to wield it. However, their conversation was interrupted by the impatient old man, who berated Fate. In annoyance, Fate tossed the coins onto the shop owner's table and left without further ado. A new customer entered the shop, and the old man greeted him, causing Fate to vow never to return to that store. He wandered the market with his newly acquired sword, contemplating hunting goblins in the nearby field. Greed cautioned him not to underestimate goblins just because he had a great weapon. Fate agreed, reminiscing about advice he had received from an old patron at a bar. As Fate reached the capital's south gate, he marveled at the gathering of warriors. It seemed like a hub where adventurers assembled before embarking on monster hunting quests. Fate considered forming an impromptu party with fellow adventurers and relayed the idea to Greed. Greed suggested that Fate already had a companion in him, but Fate clarified that he meant having human comrades. Fate was excited when someone called out to him, inquiring if he was a warrior looking to form a party because their usual partner couldn't make it. Fate enthusiastically agreed, but when the other person asked about his level, Fate proudly declared it was 1. To Fate's surprise, the other person vanished without a trace. Greed remarked that Fate should give up on finding companions, suggesting that no one would want to team up with a level 1 warrior. Fate sighed and conceded that he had been getting excited after buying a sword. Intriguingly, Greed warned him not to reveal his gluttony to others. This caught Fate off guard, and he questioned, "Wait, how does he know about gluttony?" Greed responded by telling Fate, "That's because you and I are the same." Greed hinted that Fate would likely come to understand this shared aspect soon, whether he wanted to or not. Fate couldn't help but agree with Greed's assessment. He realized that it was unwise to reveal such a unique skill to others, as it could potentially lead to danger or even death if people discovered his abilities. However, Fate also recognized that this power could make him incredibly strong, untouchable by anyone. With determination, Fate declared, "All right, first up is hunting goblins." He arrived at a location south of the capital known as Goblin Field, where goblins had made their home. These creatures posed a threat to passing carriages, attacking and pillaging at will. Fate was on the lookout for goblins when he spotted one asleep. Seizing the opportunity, he thought, "This is it." Fate hid in the bushes, considering that there didn't appear to be any other enemies nearby, and the goblin was sound asleep. He used his skill to examine the goblin's stats, revealing that it was a goblin fighter. Judging from the name, Fate suspected there might be other types of goblins as well. Comparing their stats, he realized that the goblin's stats were much lower than his. Noting the goblin's skill of strength up, Fate mused about the possibility of a strength down skill for larger creatures. With a burst of courage, he launched an attack on the unsuspecting goblin. The creature woke up, and Fate's Gluttony skill was activated. Despite the initial surprise, Fate defeated the goblin and gained the strength up skill. Fate eagerly checked his stats, noticing that they were increasing. He expressed his excitement, saying, "Okay, they're increasing. I'm getting stronger." Greed, however, cautioned him not to get too carried away with defeating a mere goblin. He warned that the day would be over before Fate knew it if he did. Fate defended himself, saying, "Oh, come on, it's my first time defeating a monster after all." Fate continued his goblin hunt, noting that his experience was likely different from other warriors who faced monsters. Until now, he had only ever been able to run away from such creatures. Greed acknowledged his point, saying, Okay. Approaching another goblin, Fate decided to test his skills. He deftly cut off the goblin's ear, placing it in his bag. He recalled that converters would pay money for goblin ears, although it was only 10 copper per goblin. Still, Fate hoped that he could earn more than he did as a guard. Excitedly, he exclaimed, "All right, on to the next one." Searching for his next target, Fate came across a goblin equipped with a shield, which he recognized as a new type. He used his skill to check the goblin's stats, confirming it was a goblin guard. The shield appeared formidable, and Fate realized that these goblins likely covered each other's weaknesses, specializing in group attacks. Fate knew he needed to start with the offensive goblin, the goblin fighter, to ensure that he killed both of them. With his limited fighting experience, he aimed to eliminate any potential threats. He gripped his sword with both hands, prepared to engage them. The goblins stood on guard, their attention focused on Fate. Seeking an opening, Fate launched an attack. The goblin with the shield stepped forward, intending to block him. However, Fate's sword unexpectedly shattered the shield into 2 pieces, killing the goblin in the process. Gluttony was activated once more, and Fate gained the stamina up skill. Fate was taken aback by the outcome, stunned that he had cut through the shield so effortlessly. He glanced at his sword in disbelief. The remaining goblin retaliated, but Fate swiftly cut its arm and sword, disabling it. Disappointed that he hadn't acquired the fighter's skill, Fate checked his status. To his amazement, all his stats had once again increased. Stamina was at 221, strength at 251, magic at 131, will at 131, and agility at 201. Fate had now acquired several skills: gluttony, appraisal, mind reading, strength up, and stamina up. He realized that he could only possess one of each skill at a time. If he wanted a new skill, he would have to hunt different monsters. Curious about why he had been treated poorly despite his newfound abilities, Fate cut both Goblin Ears and asked Greed for an explanation. Greed simply replied that it was because he had chosen Fate as his wielder, offering no further details. Fate found Greed's response rather foul-mouthed, but also recognized that he needed to live up to Greed's expectations as his wielder. After a productive hunting session, Fate's bag was full of Goblin Ears. He marveled at his luck in encountering so many goblins, and wondered how his stats had changed. Checking his stats, he was astonished and exclaimed, "Holy moly, is this for real? No way! Stamina, strength, and agility are all over 1,000. However, he was puzzled as to why he still hadn't leveled up despite acquiring numerous spheres. Greed explained that Fate held one of the sacrilegious skills, Gluttony, which allowed him to steal stats and skills from others when he killed them. This act rejected the divine concept of levels, and people like him received no blessings from the gods. The fact that Fate's stats had all started at 1 was proof of this. Greed added that Fate shouldn't be curious about it. Fate was eager to continue but realized it was still light outside. Greed suggested they return to the capital. Fate agreed, lifting his sword and saying, "Now listen here, you." However, his sentence was interrupted by a loud growl from his stomach, reminding him of his hunger. Fate told Greed that he was hungry and thought they had done enough for the day. He decided that next time he would venture into a different forest and try to fight a hobgoblin. With that, he began his journey back home. Upon entering the capital with his bag full of Goblin Ears, Fate navigated through the bustling streets. People were busy chit-chatting and engaged in buying and selling. He entered a store to convert his Goblin Ears into coins, but was surprised to witness 2 men fighting over something. Fate had heard rumors about the rough nature of the guild, and this encounter confirmed their accuracy. As the 2 men pushed past him, Fate stumbled slightly, observing the chaotic scene unfolding before him. The confrontation between the two men in the store continued, with one of them telling Fate to get out of the way, referring to him as Small Fry. Nervously, Fate apologized and watched as the lady at the counter called for the next customer. He sighed in relief and thought, thank goodness. Approaching the counter, Fate showed the lady his bag full of goblin ears and asked to exchange them. She took a look at the bag and was surprised by the sheer number of ears. She commented, "Oh my, that sure is a lot of goblin ears. Did you hunt with a large party?" The lady explained to Fate the concept of aggro, where monsters of the same species would target a hunter who had killed many of their kind in one day. Typically, people only killed up to 10 of the same species in a single day to avoid this. Fate, unaware of this practice, nervously responded, "Is that so? I'm new, so I didn't know." The lady also noticed Fate's ragged appearance and assumed he had been fighting a lot. She complimented him on his efforts. Greed, chiming in, joked about Fate's attire, to which Fate told him to shut up. The sudden change in his tone surprised the lady, but Fate quickly waved it off, explaining that he found the noisy fight between the two men annoying. The lady smiled and told Fate she would prepare his reward, asking him to wait for a moment. While waiting, Fate's stomach growled again, making him think about what he should have for dinner. Greed advised him to clean him up before dinner, emphasizing the importance of proper maintenance for him. Fate agreed, thinking about how maintenance was just as crucial as food for his sword. As they talked, Fate received his reward from the lady and left the store, thinking about finding a nearby blacksmith for maintenance. After visiting the blacksmith, he thanked them and held his hard-earned money. He couldn't help but reflect on how he had earned more money in half a day than he had saved up in the past 5 years. The thought of his past life, including the bullying from Raphael and his comrades, briefly crossed his mind. However, he pushed those thoughts aside, determined to leave that kind of life behind. Greed advised Fate that it was essential to learn how to maintain him himself, as relying on a blacksmith for maintenance every day would be troublesome. Fate agreed, realizing that he hadn't even sustained any scratches during his recent battles. He also considered the inconvenience of having to find a blacksmith while traveling. Determined to take responsibility for Greed's maintenance, he decided to buy maintenance tools after dinner. Greed commended Fate for understanding the importance of maintenance and reminded him to be as careful as if he were polishing gemstones. Fate acknowledged Greed's pride as a weapon, and with their plans set, he headed off for dinner. Fate looked forward to a bit of a luxurious meal and decided on having meat, particularly grilled meat. He stood in front of a shop that emitted a rich aroma of grilled meat and was about to enter when a man abruptly pushed him aside. Fate fell to the ground and noticed a little girl with the man. The girl appeared to be in a distressing state, and the man was pulling her along. The man angrily questioned Fate and called him names, to which Fate responded in a defiant tone. Fate tried to stop the man, grabbing the girl's shoulder as the man pulled her away. In that moment, Fate heard a mysterious voice saying, "Save me." This unexpected voice left Fate perplexed, as he couldn't comprehend why a girl he had never met would ask for his help. He suspected that the man was not the girl's father, and he wondered if she was being abducted. Fate attempted to use his skill to check the man's statistics, but to his surprise, he couldn't see any skills listed. Greed explained that it must be a hiding skill that concealed the man's true abilities. Despite the lack of visible skills, the man's statistics indicated that he was a warrior. However, his menacing demeanor suggested he wouldn't hesitate to harm a human being. Fate decided to prioritize saving the girl and put his meal plans on hold. Greed cautioned him against showing mercy to someone who wouldn't hesitate to kill, as it could backfire later. Fate followed the kidnapper and the girl to a warehouse where he peered through a broken window. Inside, he saw the girl chained to a pillar. The kidnapper callously slapped the girl, expressing his delight in kidnapping children, claiming they became obedient when threatened. Fate felt empathy for the little girl, especially when he remembered his own experiences of being bullied for his useless ability and mistreated by others. The kidnapper continued to torment the girl, telling her she would become a plaything for a holy night, and recounting the fate of the last girl he had kidnapped, who had died in just a week. He callously kicked the girl, sending her flying several meters. Witnessing this brutality, Fate struggled to control his emotions, but Greed warned him not to let his emotions take over. Fate calmed himself and approached the girl after the kidnapper left through the door. Using his sword's ability, he cut through the chain, and the girl cheered, thinking she was free. However, her expression suddenly changed to fear, and when Fate turned to look behind him, he saw the kidnapper staring at him. Fate couldn't help but realize he had fallen into a trap. It was a challenging situation, as he had to protect the girl while facing the kidnapper. Greed advised Fate to step back, and he followed the instruction. The overconfident kidnapper, believing he had the upper hand, approached Fate. Fate seized the opportunity and swiftly attacked when the kidnapper's guard was down, cutting through him. As the kidnapper's life began to slip away, he confessed that it was Hud Blelik who had orchestrated everything. Fate promised to put the Blelik family and the evildoers in their place, fueled by the skills he had absorbed. One of these skills was Sharp Edge, which allowed him to hit twice when countering. After the ordeal, Fate and the little girl enjoyed a meal in a beautiful and fancy restaurant. He then returned her to the nearby orphanage. The nuns had been worried about her absence, but were relieved to see her back. The little girl tearfully expressed her gratitude to Fate, and he bid her farewell. As he looked at her face, he realized that his journey was far from over, and the path ahead would be challenging. Later, the thought of visiting Roxy's family castle crossed Fate's mind. He felt nervous about it, considering Roxy's polite behavior toward him, even though she was a holy knight. He planned to visit the mansion of the 5 great families the next day. Greed, on the other hand, remained calm and unflustered, dismissing Fate's worries as petty. The next day, Fate dressed in a nice outfit and set off for Mrs. Roxy's mansion. He was welcomed as a guest and guided to Roxy. As he walked through the beautiful surroundings, Fate couldn't help but admire the beauty and tranquility of the place. Roxy, dressed elegantly instead of her usual armor, left him mesmerized by her beauty, causing her to blush at his compliment. Roxy led Fate to her father's grave, where she hired him and paid her respects to her late father. She explained that her father had passed away 5 days ago in Gallia, the capital of the southern continent. His death was unrelated to the strong monsters in their region. Instead, it was due to a disaster caused by the Sky Dragon, a creature of unimaginable strength. Roxy's father had been leading a massive army when the Sky Dragon suddenly appeared and annihilated him and his forces. Fate learned about the unexpected death of Roxy's father, who had been killed by the Sky Dragon, an unprecedented event that no one could have foreseen. Roxy had just returned from her father's funeral, and she expressed her determination to raise the status of their house in her father's absence. She asked Fate for his help, and he made a promise to assist her in this endeavor. As Fate stood before her father's grave, he felt a growing sense of determination and a desire to become stronger, so that he wouldn't let Roxy down. The following day, Fate woke up with a smile on his face and enjoyed his day working in the mansion's garden with the head gardener. However, during dinner he felt an unusual hunger that couldn't be satisfied, and something seemed different. Roxy noticed that Fate appeared pale and overworked and asked him if he was okay. Fate assured her that he was fine, but soon fainted at the dinner table. When Fate regained consciousness, he found a note from Roxy indicating that he should take a day off. He felt regret for becoming a burden to her and asked Greed about the situation. Greed explained that Fate's skill had entered a state called starvation mode after tasting a soul. This mode would only grow stronger and hungrier, requiring Fate to feed it more souls to satisfy its hunger. Fate's reflection in the mirror revealed his burning red eyes, a manifestation of his skill's hunger. Terrified by the potential consequences of his insatiable skill, Fate hurriedly grabbed his gear and weapon and left the mansion in a hurry. He ran out panting, feeling intense pain and hunger, knowing that he must find a way to manage this dangerous condition and prevent it from harming his loved ones, including Roxy. Before we continue, let's take a moment to shout out Ara Simp, who commented, "You actually made a part 2. This is why I love this channel. You actually do multiple parts on our unordinary video. Thanks for commenting." Fate's condition had worsened, and his insatiable hunger was driving him to hunt down and kill more and more creatures. As he ran through the streets and encountered guards who noticed his strange behavior and blood-red eyes, Greed explained to him that his skill, Gluttony, made him see weaker individuals as prey and smell their presence. However, the guards were likely to dismiss his odd behavior as mere superstition or imagination. As Fate continued to run, he suddenly encountered 3 individuals dressed in black robes, whom he recognized as his former tormentors from the Blelik family. Wondering why they were behaving suspiciously, he wanted to follow them, but his hunger and cravings prevented him from doing so. Desperate to satiate his hunger, Fate headed to the goblin field and started mercilessly killing goblins. However, even after killing numerous goblins, his hunger remained insatiable, and his eyes remained red and eerie. Greed analyzed the situation and concluded that goblins wouldn't be enough to satisfy Fate's hunger, and he needed to hunt elsewhere. Fate was trapped in a cycle of hunger and violence, and he couldn't stop himself from seeking out more prey to feed his insatiable skill. He did feel stronger than usual, but that was because of the gnawing hunger that had been his constant companion. The pit of his stomach ached, and his red eyes glowed with a fierce hunger that threatened to consume him. Freed, his loyal companion, had once told him that his crimson eyes held a secret power, one that could amplify his strength. Fate knew he could use this newfound strength to help his ever-present companion Gluttony until its insatiable hunger was sated. What will happen next? Find out next time by staying tuned for our future recaps. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great recaps.